Well, let's get more on this now. Joining us from New York is Mark Thompson. He's the radio host of Make It Plain. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. Firstly, what do you make of what's going on in North Carolina, the protests tonight and the protest that started with the shooting of Keith Scott after Tuesday afternoon?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. This is tragic, and it's a very sad night for the people of Charlotte. However, as Dr. King said, riots, so-called riots, are the language of the unheard. What is happening tonight, as tragic as it is an extension and a direct result of the modern-day lynching of Keith Lamont Scott that occurred the other day. That's what we're living under here in America. As a matter of fact, you really have to wonder, what is the real rioting going on? Is it the reaction of these protesters? Is that rioting? Or is this a good old-fashioned police riot with all of the violence that's being carried out against African Americans? As an African American male in the United States, all I can count on is my faith in God that I'll make it home every night. But I have to ponder, as all African American males, grown men and young men have to ponder every day, whether we're even going to make it home safely every night, or whether we are too ourselves going to be victims of the police. Keith Lamont Scott had a book. The police are saying he had a gun. That will have to be flushed out, which side of the story is true. We know without a doubt in Tulsa that Terrence Crutcher had his hands in the air. These things are happening far too often. So again, I think we have to question whether or not these are examples of the police actually rioting against us. And then we're not helped at all by one of our major parties' presidential candidates fanning the flames today, calling for there to be national stop and frisk. Stop and frisk doesn't help. What we are seeing is that African Americans are being profiled. African Americans are being existentially accused of suspicion. And so this is something that we have to be concerned about.
And Mr. Thompson, we have spoken to activists from the Black Lives Matter movement who are in Charlotte this evening, who've told us that they also fear for their safety because they're African American. We still don't actually know what happened in the case of Keith Scott because the video hasn't been released. Police are saying he had a gun. Keith Scott's family is saying it was a book. So how important is it at this moment that that video be released? And even if it turns out that Keith Scott did have a gun, can we expect these protests to stop when there have been so many incidents of unarmed African American men who have been targeted by authorities?
Well, let me just say, in terms of expecting them to stop, I don't think so. I think non-violent protest in the spirit of Dr. King is appropriate. I don't support violent protests. I don't think anyone does. But non-violent protests should continue, and non-violent protests should also be manifest at the ballot box so that elected officials, mayors, city council members are voted out of office who don't support transparency, including this no-good Governor McCrory in North Carolina. He needs to be gone. Transparency is important. We need to see that video. But let me be clear. Whatever that video shows, there is no justification for the death of Keith Lamont Scott. He did not leave his home to commit a crime. He did not leave his home to threaten the police. He left his home to pick his child up from the school bus stop. How, under what circumstances does that mean someone needs to lose their lives? Now, I don't know what the altercation with the police was. We know that they were unidentified, they were plainclothes, and we also know apparently they were looking for another suspect. How does that result in Keith Lamont Scott's death? Mind you, North Carolina is an open carry state. So even if he did have a gun, why does he deserve to die? What if he had a gun and a book? What difference does it make? He went there to pick up his child, and I'm not sure how that can result in a summary execution. Just
lastly, and briefly if we can, Mr. Thompson, it has been nearly 4 years now since the Black Lives Matter movement started, of course, after the death of Trayvon Martin. What difference would you say the movement has made? Because we are still seeing these deaths all the time.
Well, it's a slow process because police are governed locally. This is really a local struggle on local levels. So communities are going to have to get involved on local level to deal with local police departments. And I think we've seen some reform in some cities, but it's city by city. It's not state by state. It's barely even a national process because police aren't governed nationally in this country by the DOJ or anyone else. So it's a slow, unsexy, unglamorous process to deal with this. But I think the difference is more exposure, more transparency, and now we know what is happening.
Mark
and we're
Thompson,
acting.
I'm afraid that's all we have the time for, but we thank you very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. We are leaving you with live pictures from Charlotte, North Carolina, where protests continue after the killing of a black man by police.